Jared Bernstein's here, chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Congratulations on a good night, sir. Appreciate you being here. It was a good night a year ago as well for President Biden. Said a lot of the same things about the economy. And the economic numbers change. Things are doing better by the numbers. They are not doing better in the polls. How and what has to change, and how will you do it between now and November so people feel what the president's talking about?
Well, one of the things we've seen in the past few months is that people's feelings about the economy are actually picking up, and in some cases pretty quickly. There's a sentiment index that's very closely watched, and it's up 25% in the past 3 months. And what we think we see there, by the way, a lot more progress to be made there, but moving in the right direction. What we think we see there is that the combination of very strong labor markets, providing people with great job opportunities, easing inflationary pressures, is leading to real wage gains.
Fair to say, though, that people still feel poorer, perhaps, than when President Biden took office. The inflation that we saw ate into people's real wages. I take your point that there is growth there. Rasmussen polling on the economy, 74% of elites, and this is Rasmussen defining elites as people who live in an urban area, they have a postgraduate degree, and they make more than $150,000 a year. 74% of elites say they're improving their finances. Just 20% of registered voters agree that their finances are improving. 84% of elites approve of President Biden's handling of the economy. It's doing well for them, versus just 40% of registered voters. If President Biden is to win the working class vote, how does he not just make things good for the elites?
Well, I think if you listened to the president last night, you really heard a very detailed and I think pretty fiery answer to that question. The president talked about how far we've come in this economy and how, in fact, contrary to some of the numbers that you were throwing up, how much economic progress we've made really on behalf of middle and lower income folks. By the way, their real wages, their real incomes, for many folks, they're up from before the pandemic. If you look at earnings, for example, they're up a couple percent from where they were before the pandemic in real terms, after adjusting for inflation. If you ask people about their financial conditions, yes, those numbers still have a ways to go, but they are improving. So really the question becomes, and this I think is a direct answer to your question, are we moving in the right direction? Are middle, lower income people, people who live in families just like the one this president grew up on, where all of these issues were kitchen table issues. Hold on a second. Ask those folks in particular if they're improving, and they will tell you, as I said, 25% in the Consumer Sentiment Index over the past 3 months up, moving in the right direction, but still a ways to go.
All right, so point taken. If things are moving in the right direction, how do you explain, though, that for 3 years President Biden was Scranton Joe, and he's been in charge of economic policies for the past 3 years? 3 years. And it's still a 40 to 60% difference between how the elites feel versus everybody else feels. These have been his policies for 3 years, and yet it's the elites who've benefited more. Doesn't that say there's an indictment of the policies themselves?
I can easily find you poll. You're cherry picking a poll that says something that you keep repeating. I can show you lots of polls where 80% of people say the rural broadband that this president is putting into place to help them ease the cost of rural broadband. These are rural folks who, in many cases, have middle and low incomes. Will tell you that's great. They'll say the same thing about replacing lead pipes with pipes that give them clean water to drink. They'll say the same thing about standing up manufacturing industries, chips production. They'll say the same thing about the lower cost of prescription drugs. If you actually go out and ask people about the granular accomplishments this president has made in areas that I just cited, particularly around lower costs, lower junk fees, for example, you're seeing poll numbers that are in the 80s.
Look, the hope, obviously, is they move enough in the right direction. President's at 38%. The last two presidents who were one-term presidents, H.W. Bush and Donald Trump were above that point at right now. But you said we were cherry-picking polls. One recent CBS News survey, 65% of Americans said that the economy under Trump was good. Only 30% said the same under President Biden. I get your point, and we can argue data all day long.
No, I was talking about particularly about this elitist that you keep bringing up.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.